have to read this now, or have we done it already?
No, Ranga, we have read it. We have to redo it.
Okay, in that case, I will read each sentence and we'll discuss it. Okay, I start. This preoccupation with life and matter is at the beginning right and necessary, because the first step that man has to take is to know and possess this physical existence as well as he can by applying his thought and intelligence to such experience of it as his sense mind can give to him. So what Swami is saying is that in the beginning we may find fault with somebody who is very materialistic, but it is necessary for him to do that. He has to completely start from the bottom, and so it's right. Okay? We must not judge somebody by at which level he is. For him it is absolutely essential. Okay? That's what Swami is saying. But once you have done that, you have to go higher up, higher up. You shouldn't get stuck at that same level. But this is only a preliminary step. And if we stop there, we have made no real progress. We have to go beyond the material and the vital life. We are where we were and have gained only more physical elbow room to move about in, and more power for our mind to establish a relative knowledge and an insufficient and precarious mastery, and for our life desire to push things about and jostle and hustle around amid the throng of physical forces and existences. What Swami is saying is that if we stop there, okay, for instance, that's what's happening in modern times. We have got motor cars, we have got planes, aeroplanes, we have got mobile, we have got TV, but is that progress? It is progress at the physical level, but it is not progress at the spiritual level. That's what Swami is saying. So if you want to consider the spiritual context, you have to go beyond pure materialism. To get a phone and get wealthy and get a house and all that is very fine, it's necessary. But it is not spiritual progress. The spiritual progress, you have to go beyond the mind. That's what Swami is saying. The utmost widening of a physical objective knowledge, even if it embrace the most distant solar systems and the deepest layers of the earth and sea and the most subtle powers of material substance and energy, is not the essential gain for us, not the one thing which is most needful for us to acquire. Now, we look at the sentence carefully and look at each thing what he is saying. The utmost widening of a physical objective knowledge, science. Physical objective knowledge is science. Okay? Even if it embraces the most distant solar systems and the deepest layers of the earth and sea and the most subtle powers of material substance and energy, is not essential gain for us. We look at each one. First of all, embrace the most distant solar systems. We have gone to the moon. Now we are thinking of going to the Mars and settling there. So Swami is saying, even if you go beyond that, it's not progress. It's not spiritual progress. So, at the deepest layers of the earth, if you go down, 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 okay, and see, we are exploring everything in the physical world. Sea also is being explored. But I am not sure whether we have gone to the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean. But even if you go there, it's a wonderful thing physically. Scientifically it's wonderful. But it is not spiritual progress. And the most subtle powers of material substance and energy. Now what are these? The most subtle powers of material substance are precisely what we are doing now. You are one is in Nasik, one is in Calcutta, one is in Bombay, okay? But that is not progress. That is only physical perfection. That's what Swami is saying. Okay? And he is also saying, most subtle powers of material substance, for instance, the TV, we are using TV waves, we are using mobiles. So that is what he means by most subtle powers of material substance and energy. Or nowadays we are even doing remote sensing using remotes for TV. We are using subtle force. It's a subtle physical force. Okay? That's what symbol is. It is not that which we need to acquire. That is why the gospel of materialism, in spite of the dazzling triumphs of physical science, proves itself always in the end a vain and helpless creed. We have invented all these things. We have invented the TV and the mobile. But has it brought harmony in life? Absolutely not. We are still thinking of so many how to get better than the neighbor. Okay, this is what is going on. No harmony, no higher ideals in life. Science proves itself always in the end a vain and helpless creed. And that too is why physical science itself, with all its achievements, though it may accomplish comfort, can never achieve happiness and fullness of being for a human race. So, for instance, science is going on improving, but have we been able to eliminate disease? No. And if you cannot eliminate disease, you will never be happy fully. So happiness cannot come by acquisition of modern conveniences, like mobiles and house and car. This will not give you happiness. Not at all. Can never achieve happiness and fullness of being for a human race. Our true happiness lies in the true growth of our whole being. And which is the whole being? Not only body and life, but also mind and also soul. Even mind development is not there so much, but the soul is hardly known to anybody. Okay? So our true happiness lies in the true growth of our whole being, in a victory throughout the total range of our existence, in mastery of the inner as well as and more than the outer, the hidden as well as the overt nature. Overt nature, body, mind, life. Hidden life, your inner being, inner vital, inner physical, inner mind, and also your psychic being. Our true completeness comes not by describing wider circles on the plane where we began, but by transcendence. Physically, when we are using all these conveniences, okay, scooters and mobiles and all, it is a, Sranga is using a very interesting word, he is saying it is a describing wider circles on the plane. Okay? It's not going up. But we have to go up. The progress must be qualitative, not quantitative. Okay? It is for this reason that after the first necessary foundation in life and matter, we have to heighten our force of consciousness, deepen, widen, subtilize it. We must first liberate our mental selves and enter into a freer, finer and nobler plane of our mental existence. So we have to start, as Sevenfold says in the interior yoga, there are people who think that you start from the body. Okay? Even in yoga, you start from the body. Hatha yoga does that. Okay? Or you can start from the vital. The bhakti yoga does that. But in Sevenfold yoga, he says we start from the concept of soul in mind. Okay? That's what we begin with. So that is the difference. So he says, because we are even in our... wait, I read the sentence again. We must first liberate our mental selves and enter into a freer, finer and nobler plane of our mental existence. For the mental is much more than the physical, our true existence, because we are, even in our instrumental or expressive nature, predominantly mind and not matter. Mental, much more than physical beings. Human beings are more mental than physical beings, but most men are limited to the physical mind. But you have to go up to the pure mind, the capacity for intellectual thought. That growth into the full mental being is the first transitional movement towards human perfection and freedom. So someone who is more mental than vital and physical. He is at a slightly higher level than the normal man who lives at the physical vital level. It does not actually perfect, it does not liberate the soul, but it lifts us one step out of the material and vital absorption and prepares the loosening of the hold of the ignorance. So Ranga is saying mental development is essential as a step towards spiritual life. Okay? So you may wonder that there are so many people who are ignorant. Okay, like for instance Ramakrishna. Okay, he was even illiterate. He would only sign his name. So you must realize that he is talking of the mental. He is talking of the ordinary people. Okay, when you are in the ordinary consciousness, okay, it doesn't matter. You have to develop your mind on the way to becoming a spiritual person. There are other cases also where outwardly they were not developed at all. So why instead of saying that you have to, first is Sai Baba, okay? Not the Puttaparthi one, the other one, the original Sai Baba in Shirdi. So he was almost like a beggar. Okay? But he was so developed in spiritual consciousness. So, but Ranga is saying, if we go through the mind, okay, it's a very good preparation for a spiritual life for the ordinary being. For the ordinary being. These cases are exceptional cases. Okay. We can now go to the next one. Our gain in becoming more perfect mental beings. Okay, so somebody has to read. Either Archana can read if she has the text. Our gain in becoming. Archana, can you read?
Yes, Ranga. I was unmuted.
Go ahead.
Our gain in becoming more perfect mental beings is that we get to the possibility of a subtler, higher and wider existence. Consciousness, force, happiness and delight of being. In proportion as we rise in the scale of mind, a greater power of these things comes to us. Our mental consciousness acquires for itself at the same time more vision and power and more subtlety and plasticity. And we are able to embrace more of the vital and physical existence itself, to know it better, to use it better, to give it nobler values, a broader range, a more sublimated action, an extended scale, higher issues. Man is in his characteristic power of nature a mental being, but in the first steps of his emergence he is more of the mentalized animal, preoccupied like the animal with his bodily existence. He employs his mind for the uses, interests, desires of the life and the body, as the servant and minister, not yet as the sovereign and master. It is as he grows in mind and in proportion as his mind asserts its selfhood and independence against the tyranny of life and matter that he grows in stature. On one side, mind, by its emancipation, controls and illumines the life and physicality. On the other, the purely mental aims, occupations, pursuits of knowledge begin to get a value. The mind, liberated from a lower control and preoccupation, introduces into life a government and uplifting, a refinement, a finer balance and harmony. The vital and physical movements are directed and put into order, transformed even as far as they can be by a mental agency. They are taught to be the instruments of reason and obedient to an enlightened will, an ethical perception, and an aesthetic intelligence. The more this can be accomplished, the more the race becomes truly human, a race of mental beings.
He is explaining here why it is necessary to develop the mind. Okay, very clearly he is saying all these things. Our gain in becoming more perfect mental beings is that we get to the possibility of a subtler, higher and wider existence. So if you develop your mind, even among those who are in spiritual consciousness, if your mental is developed more, naturally you are superior even in that category of spiritual beings. That is exactly what is being said. Okay? There are many spiritual people who have not necessarily enlarged their mental understanding of things. Mental understanding is at the physical level, okay? But those who are already at a spiritual level, they don't care so much for the mind anymore. Okay? But if you are starting from the bottom and you develop your mind, the possibility of a subtler, higher and wider existence, consciousness, force, happiness and delight of being increases. Okay? That's what it is. Our gain in becoming more perfect mental beings is, very clearly is stating, that we get the possibility of a subtler, higher and wider existence, consciousness, force, happiness and delight of being. In proportion as we rise in the scale of mind, now he uses the word scale of mind, remember. So according to Sevenfold, the mind is there everywhere. Okay? We know that evolution, everything is there everywhere. Even the higher spirit is there in matter. But if you consider only mind, it starts from the physical mind level, goes to the vital mind level, goes to the pure mind level, and onward, on to higher mind, illumined mind. So that's why Sevenfold is speaking of the scale of mind. Okay? So, all human beings have mind, but at what scale are they at? That's the whole point. Okay? So if you are at a mental pure mind level, you are a sattvic person. Okay? So, if you are at a higher mind level, then you are a spiritual person. A greater power of these things comes to us. So Sevenfold is not saying that it is essential. Mental development is not essential for spiritual life, but it becomes much more wider, subtler, higher if you develop your mind. Note interestingly that not too many people who are spiritual have developed their minds. Okay? Mind is an instrument of nature. It's nothing spiritual. So, but if you develop your mind, then the capacity of understanding things and happiness and force and consciousness increases like anything. So compare Ramakrishna, okay? Compare with the others who did not develop their mind so much. But when Sevenfold is an extraordinary case of tremendous mental development and yet higher spiritual possibilities. Okay? The greater power of these things comes to us. Our mental consciousness acquires for itself at the same time more vision and power and more subtlety and plasticity. So if you develop your mind, this is what happens. It's much more. The perfection can be much more. And we are able to embrace more of the vital and physical existence itself. Even the vital and the physical existence can become richer if you develop your mind. To know it better, to use it better, to give it nobler values, a broader range, a more sublimated action, an extended scale, higher issues. Very clear, Sevenfold is saying. In other words, it is hinted at that you may argue that mental development is at the level 1. Mental development is body-mind life level. So what has it got to do with spiritual development? So Sevenfold is saying very clearly that if you develop that, the spiritual perfection can be 10 times more perfect. That's what exactly he is saying. Okay? Extended scale. Okay? Man is, in his characteristic power of nature, a mental being. But in the first steps of his emergence, he is more of the mentalized animal. It's a physical mind that is most active in human beings. Okay? Preoccupied, like the animal, with his bodily existence. What's the bodily existence characteristic? Mainly food and the necessity of prolonging your clan. Okay? So you can say reproduction. Food, reproduction and sleep. These are the three things which are necessary for bodily existence. Most human beings are interested only at that level. But if he employs the human being, he employs his mind for the uses, interests, desires of the life and the body. Okay, only, not the mind. As a servant and minister. So your mind is a servant of the life and the body. Okay? The body wants something and the mind will immediately find reasons to support it and do what is necessary. Your vital is having desires and you use your mind to see how to satisfy that desire. You are a slave to body, mind, life. That's what he's saying. He is a servant and minister. As a servant and minister. Now minister here is a very interesting word. To minister to the needs of somebody. Okay? It's used in that sense. A minister is someone who is a minister in the government, not in that sense. Okay? As a servant and minister. To minister to someone's needs. Okay? The word is used in that sense. Okay? You are ministering to the needs of the life and the body. As a servant and minister. Not yet as a sovereign master. There you are, very clear. Okay? But mind has to be master of body life and not a servant. It is as he grows in mind and in proportion, as his mind asserts its selfhood and independence against the tyranny of life and matter. So, which is the tyranny of life and which is the tyranny of matter? The tyranny of matter is, as I told you, the three things which are necessary. Food, sleep and sex. This is the tyranny. They impose themselves on you. You have to satisfy them. And what is the tyranny of life? Desires. Once a desire comes in, you have to satisfy the desire. Normal man. And if you don't satisfy the desire, you will be harassed. Okay? You will be harassed until you get it. This is a normal human being. Okay? But once you do that, the mind has to become master and not slave to body, mind, life. To body and life. That he grows in stature. Once he does that, he can grow in stature. He has to become master and not servant. On one side, mind by its emancipation controls and illumines the life and the physicality. So on one side. Okay? And what is the side? By its emancipation. Emancipation means becoming free. Okay? Emancipation is freedom. So when does the mind become freedom? When it rises to the higher mind level 2. Okay? It is not a servant of the body and life. On one side, mind by its emancipation controls and illumines the life and physicality. On the other, the purely mental aims, occupations, pursuits of knowledge begin to get a value. Thoughts have a value. Mental occupation has got its own value. Most people don't understand. Okay? They consider the mind to be absolutely unnecessary. Okay? It sounds very funny, but that's the truth. The mind liberated from a lower control and preoccupation introduces into life a government. The mind starts governing the body and the vital, an uplifting, a refinement, a finer balance and harmony. So, refinement, okay? The more refined you become, the more sattvic you become. A finer balance and harmony. It's not that you should not enjoy. Of course you should enjoy. But that enjoyment should be refinement. A finer balance and harmony. The vital and physical movements are directed and put into order. When the desires come, there is no order. There is chaos in the being. Transformed, even as far as they can be, by mental agency. They are taught to be instruments of reason and obedient to an enlightened will, an ethical perception and an aesthetic intelligence. So, if you become a mentalized person, your vital life and physical life also becomes more beautiful and more harmonious. That's what Swami is saying. The more this can be achieved, the more the race becomes truly human. He is speaking not of the individual, but he is speaking of the entire humanity. It has to develop the mind. A race of mental beings. This has not yet happened. Okay? He says a mental person is a rarity. He says that very clearly in the Synthesis of yoga. Now we go to the next one. It is this perception of life that is put in front of the Greek.
Hello.
Yes, tell me. Yes,
Would it be that by developing the mind, you are practicing Jnana Yoga?
No, not me. He is not talking of yoga at all. He is talking
No,
of...
I'm just saying that would indulging in Jnana Yoga mean that you are developing your mental being?
No. When you are doing Jnana Yoga, you are not developing a mental being.
Not at all.
You are preparing yourself to go above the mind. But in normal life, Sevenfold is talking here of the normal life. If you have to develop, if you are only at the vital and physical level, you have to develop your mind. It will help you later on for yoga also. But if you are doing Jnana Yoga, you are not developing your mind. You are going beyond the mind. No? But if you have
To the spiritual levels.
Yes, that's right. You are trying to go beyond the mind. You are not trying to develop the mind. In fact, development of mind can be a huge nuisance. Like Amal Kiran, for instance, he was a very intelligent man. Okay, great development of the mind, but it was his main stumbling block. he has to quieten his mind. A very interesting case. So we go to the. Sevenfold is speaking of the necessity for the normal humanity. Before human race can become spiritual, it has to become a mental race. That is what he is talking about. Okay? He is not talking about yoga at all. He is saying that even before yoga, a large part of humanity must become mental beings, proper mental beings. Now we go to the next para. It is this perception of life. Yasmin, you can read if you have to.
Yes, I'll read.
Go ahead.
It is this perception of life that was put in front by the Greek thinkers, and it is a vivid flowering in the sunlight of this ideal that imparts so great a fascination to Hellenic life and culture. In later times, this perception was lost, and when it came back, it returned much diminished, mixed with more turbid elements, the perturbation of a spiritual ideal imperfectly grasped by the understanding and not at all realized in life's practice, but present with its positive and negative mental and moral influences, and over against it the pressure of a dominant and inordinate vital urge which could not get its free, self-satisfied movement, stood in the way of the sovereignty of the mind and the harmony of life, its realized beauty and balance. An opening to higher ideals, a greater range of life was gained, but the elements of a new idealism were only cast into its action as an influence, could not dominate and transform it, and finally the spiritual endeavor, thus ill understood and unrealized, was thrown aside. Its moral effects remained, but, deprived of the sustaining spiritual element, dwindled towards ineffectivity. The vital urge, assisted by an imminent development of physical intelligence, became the preoccupation of the race. An imposing increase of a certain kind of knowledge and efficiency was the first result. The recent outcome has been a perilous spiritual ill health and a vast disorder.
So, let's see what he's saying. He's giving the example of Greece. Greece and Rome were very developed in the early Christian era. I don't remember the exact 300 BC. Around 300 BC, Greece, Greek civilization was fantastic development. Okay? Not only in politics, but even in philosophy and science. Okay? In fact, your philosophy books, if you read the Greek philosophers, there were any number of Greek philosophers. Huge number. Okay? And Sevenfold was at that time in Greece, we know that, because he has very clearly stated that he remembers his contact with Dilip Kumar Roy in ancient Greece. Okay? So, Sevenfold was already there, and we have a suspicion that he may have been Heraclitus, because he has written a book on Heraclitus' philosophy. Okay? So, and he knows it so well. I don't know if he read Heraclitus' philosophy, but if he was himself Heraclitus, naturally he would know his philosophy at that time. It's very interesting. Okay. So that's what he is discussing. That is mental development, which I am talking about, which he is saying, I am talking about mental development. Best example is Greek culture and Greek civilization. Okay. It is this perception of life. What is that perception of life? Mind must control the vital and the body. That is the perception. It is this perception of life that was put in front by the Greek thinkers. And it's a vivid flowering in the sunlight of this idea that imparts so great a fascination to Hellenic life and culture. Hellenic life, Greek. Okay. Hellenic life is talking about Greek culture. So it is fascinating because it was so mental development was at its peak at that time. In later times, this perception was lost. Okay? And when it came back, it returned much diminished, mixed with more turbid elements. Okay? Turbid element, vital. Okay? The perturbation of a spiritual ideal, imperfectly grasped by the understanding and not at all realized in the life's practice, but present with its positive and negative mental and moral influences. Greek civilization, when it fell, there was an attempt to go up again, but it was very mixed. That's what Sevenfold is pointing out. But present with its positive and negative mental development and moral influences. What is negative mental? When the mind becomes too rigidly fixed in its own thoughts, it becomes a problem. That's a negative element. Mind must be very flexible. But intellectual people have an idea of to fix their mental ideas on certain basic ideas, which they think are the permanent ideas. But that's not the truth. All mental ideas are only transitive. They have no essential value. And moral influences. And over against it, the pressure of a dominant and inordinate vital urge which could not get its free, self-satisfied movement, stood in the way of the sovereignty of the mind and the harmony of life, its realized beauty and balance. Greek civilization, like other civilizations, perished and tried to come back, but it could not reach that standard which it had earlier. And opening to higher ideals, a greater range of life was gained. But the elements of a new idealism were only cast into its action as an influence, not as a dynamic power, but an influence. Could not dominate and transform it. And finally, the spiritual endeavor, thus ill understood and unrealized, was thrown aside. So spirituality could not at all develop, even in spite of the mental development. Its moral effects remain. Moral effects at the mental level. But deprived of the sustaining spiritual element, dwindled towards ineffectivity. The vital urge, assisted by the immense development of physical intelligence, the physical mind, became the preoccupation of the race. This is talking about the Greek race. An imposing increase of a certain kind of knowledge and efficiency was the first result. The most recent outcome has been a perilous spiritual ill health and a vast disorder. He is talking here of an imposing increase of a certain kind of knowledge. Certain kind of knowledge, the physical knowledge, science, and efficiency was the first result. The most recent outcome has been a perilous spiritual ill health and a vast disorder. He is talking of the vast disorder. 90% I think he is talking of the world wars that came into the picture. Just 1 second. Yeah. A vast disorder, and because he mentioned it very clearly, the most recent outcome. Okay. So, in fact, he says something very interesting. He says this elsewhere also. That's why I am saying that the vast disorder, he is referring to the world wars, where the greed and vital life and wrong ideas, Nietzscheism, Aryan race is the most superior, all these ideas were completely wrong, but they were resorted to. That's why the vast disorder and ill health, spiritual ill health, and perilous because it could have led to the domination of the vital influence in the world. He has referred to that in many other places also. In fact, he says something very interesting about Germany. Germany is the reason which caused 2 world wars, and the Second World War was a disastrous one because it could have ended in the Asuric influence over mankind. So it was said that very clearly elsewhere. Okay? So this is a vast disorder that he is talking about. Okay, so mental development, in other words, is a good preparation for a spiritual life, but does not necessarily lead to a spiritual life. There is a burden of what he is saying in this paragraph. Greek civilization was mentalized, and it was beautiful, it was very attractive, but it could not lead to a spiritual life. That's what he is saying. Okay, so I'll read the summary of what he is saying here. Then we may get a better idea of what is happening. So, the summary goes like this of what we read just now. So, when the mind, no more subject to the lower control of body and vital, it becomes capable of a proper governance, a refinement, a development of ethical and aesthetic activities. Note interestingly how in the Greek, their architecture, even today it survives. And the statues that they made, they are still available. All those Greek, the Greek statues, all that, beautiful. They're very, their sculpture was absolutely fantastic. It is still, it is this level that Greek culture reached, mental development. And it is this view of life that made Hellenic culture so fascinatingly interesting. But later, this cultural trait was lost, and when it came back, it is a diminished and degraded copy of the earlier, purer version. The vital life that came in did not allow the pure mentality to influence the life. Spirituality, ill understood and was replaced. Moral ideas without spiritual support became weak and inapplicable in life. Later, a vast disorder was a result. Later means in modern times. It is very clear, and Will Durant, who is a fantastic historian, he says that entire modern European culture is only a footnote to Greek culture. Greek culture is the origin, but modern European culture is not superior to Greek culture. It's only a footnote, he says. So, that is what is meant. But it could not go to spiritual life. So, but if you develop your mind, spiritual life becomes much vaster and much more mature, much riper, more ripe. Yes, yes. We have to stop here today, 8:40. So next time we will go to the next para. For mind itself is not enough. There you are, very clear. Mental development is necessary, but itself it is not enough to go to spiritual life. We reach from there. 760 for mind itself is not enough. Okay? I make a note. Okay, au revoir everybody.